So let's go straight to that interview now. Privileged to speak with Guy Verhofstadt, who served as Prime Minister of Belgium a long stretch, 1999 through 2008. He was the European Parliament Brexit coordinator and chaired the Brexit steering group through those rocky times, and is MEP for Belgium from the Renew Europe group. And more on Renew Europe perhaps in a moment. But first, obviously, privileged to have you on. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Verhofstadt. You gave an interview to an Austrian newspaper, Wiener Zeitung. You said we need a united EU military now. Why at this time? Good morning.
Well, because the war in Ukraine shows very well the weakness of Europe and the European Union, and the lack of unity certainly in military. Because we have not to forget that Europe is more or less spending 240 billion euro a year on military. The Russians 60 billion euro a year on military. So we are spending 4 times more, but that's not what you see in reality. So there is an enormous duplication inside the European Union. So I think that the European Defence Union as a pillar, a European pillar of NATO, would make sense in the future. Yeah, as one of the lessons of this crisis.
So this operates the EU army operates within NATO, Mr. Verhofstadt?
Yeah, exactly. Today, NATO is still, in fact, an alliance of nations, individual nations, and I think. It's clear that's also the thinking in more and more democratic circles in the United States that we need a North Atlantic treaty organization that's based on blocks, on a North American bloc, on a European bloc, solid European bloc, with less duplication, with more efficiency. And that is, in my opinion, even more important than increasing the so-called military budgets. Everybody is talking of the need to increase it to 2%. But what does it mean if every military budget in every member state is going up to 2%? You are still continuing the duplication with more than 100 different military systems, while the Americans have only 20 or 30 different military systems and equipment.
It's interesting you mentioned that figure of 2%, because you'll be aware, Mr. Verhofstadt, more than 12 members of the European Union don't reach that suggestion. So if they don't pay for NATO, how are they going to be paying for an EU army as well?
Yeah, like I said, in total, we are already spending 240 billion.
Not you personally, sir, but the EU members don't meet their NATO obligations.
That's true, but my point is that even when they met, everybody is meeting 2%. That will be not the solution for the problem. Like I said, the European Union is spending 240 billion euro on military. That's exactly the same amount as the Chinese, and that's 4 times more than. So there is an enormous waste of money, I think, in military in Europe. And one of the lessons has to be to stop all duplication and to create what people are calling joint armed forces of the European Union as the European pillar of NATO. And that's in the interest of the North Atlantic Alliance. That's the interest of everybody, I think, and certainly of the taxpayers also.
How do you imagine Vladimir Putin would regard the establishment of an EU army?
Well, I think that he would be maybe more realistic and he would have not maybe invaded Ukraine as he did, because let's be honest, the fact that what is happening today is because Putin is saying, there will be no reaction or not a real counter-reaction by NATO or by the European Union. And in my opinion, whatever we are saying about sanctions and so on, we are not bold enough in our reaction. Not in the sanctions, not on energy, where we are still funding the war machine of Putin by buying gas, coal, and oil every day, and also not here in this country. If you look to the weak measures that they are taking against the oligarchs, so that there is certainly a need for a tougher position, and one of these elements of such a tougher position is also the plan to have a more enhanced and unified defense union.
But Mr. Verhofstadt, you talk about the measures that are being taken. The United States will cease the use of Russian oil this month. The United Kingdom will cease this year. Parts of Europe hope to cease by 2030. The United Kingdom is moving far faster than most of Europe.
Well, I think that we can. Everybody of us can do more. What the Europeans have to do more is exactly what you are underlying.
So Britain is leading the way there, then? You would allow that?
Yeah, so it's clear. The weak spot of Europe is that it's still depending on Russian oil and gas and coal. That's the weak spot. And I have proposed with a number of colleagues in the European Parliament in a letter signed by 100 MEPs to the European Council to stop immediately, to have an embargo immediately on oil, gas and coal coming from Russia. And we will suffer naturally from that. But you cannot be in solidarity with Ukraine and thinking, oh, I will not suffer. That's not solidarity. So we need to do this embargo immediately.
But why will your colleagues not support you or support the motion?
Well, because they are still thinking, oh, that will create troubles in our energy sector towards our consumers. But like I'm saying, we need to suffer also from this war. It's impossible to do so. And I think that the Americans have to do more. What the Americans have to do more is on military. You cannot continue to say we don't want a no-fly zone, and at the same time not giving airplanes and systems to defend themselves. If we don't want to do a non-fly zone in Ukraine, let's give the equipment to the Ukrainian army so that they can do themselves a non-fly zone. And thirdly, from the British side, what they have to do more is, I have seen the figures of refugees, 4,000 visas. It's the only country in the European Union who is still asking for a visum to an Ukrainian refugee. So we are a small country, Belgium. I come from Belgium, small country.
Of course I know.
We have taken in 6,000 people. So if Britain should do the same thing, there would be 40,000 people coming to Britain. And you see the generosity of the British people who are ready to do so. That
is what, in Britain, we are very excited about. 44,000. I believe the number is even higher now. What you're saying is, yet again, what I think, Mr. Verhofstadt, we have what we call red tape. We are consumed by red tape.
But exactly. It's crazy that you have red tape when there is such a refugee crisis. For once, the European Union on this was a good example, because we have activated the so-called Temporary Protection Directive, which gives the possibility immediately for all these refugees to come in Europe, in Poland, but also in all other countries in the 27 member states. And then there is one country who is continuing to ask for a visum and is only allowing 4,000 people to come in when there are 2 million of refugees. That's a bare 0.2%. So I think really that we need to do our job better. Europeans have to do things better, certainly on energy independence. The Americans have to do their things better, and the British have to make an additional effort.
Can I put it to you that perhaps the reliance on Russian oil we see from Germany under the watch of Angela Merkel was a terrible mistake?
I think it's already a terrible mistake for more than 10 years. You know, one of the latest European Council of Tony Blair was in Hampton Court. I think it was in 2006, and we decided there to establish an energy union. Well, the energy union, we did nothing to be less reliant on Russian coal and gas and so on. So there is no energy union for the moment, and that's one of the big issues for the future. But I think it's always better to start with a bold decision, and the bold decision has to be in the coming weeks. We stop any import of Russian oil, gas and coal to Europe.
You and the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson are, as we say, on the same page, are thinking exactly the same here, because he says it was a terrible mistake. So can I take from that you think Boris Johnson is doing a good job as regards the British reaction to the Ukraine conflict?
Well, I'm very... I'm very worried about the reaction of the British administration towards the refugees, like I already indicated.
Yeah, indeed.
That's a huge problem.
When I remind you that it was the United Kingdom that pushed for Russia to be taken out of the SWIFT financial system, they banned...
but there are only 7 banks in it. So 30% only of the banking sector is now outside the SWIFT system. That means, Mr. Ferrari, that 70% is still inside the SWIFT system.
I hear you. So it comes to my question, and please call me Nick. It comes to my question. Do you think the British...
I like Ferrari more, I have to tell you.
My dad was Swiss, so there we are. I'm a neutral in all of this, Guy. I'm a neutral in all of this.
No, but even Switzerland is not any neutral anymore, as you know.
Indeed,
Switzerland has joined the SWIFT sanctions.
But you know where I'm coming. You're a canny bloke. Is Boris doing a good job?
I don't think he is doing a good job when you are taking in 4,000 people only. And secondly, my fear is also on the oligarchs. Everybody knows that these oligarchs have a lot of their wealth here in London. And then I see, for example, the images of yesterday when there was one or other building in London occupied, and then sending half of the Met Police to it. For what, in fact? Sorry, if you are an individual and you cannot longer enter in your house because there is somebody in. I don't think that half of the Met Police in London will come to your rescue. So I'm very disappointed by that, because it's clear that cutting off the oligarchs of their assets here in London, but also in the rest of Europe, is one of the key sanctions we have to take to stop Putin, I think.
You mentioned those jets. There are 28 fighter jets the Ukraine are crying out for. The United States blocked Poland moving them. Is this where you think the UK should step in, or somehow we should facilitate the delivery of those aircraft to Ukraine, Mr. Verhofstadt?
Now, the whole European Union has to come in. We did it in a certain way because we activated the European Peace Facility in Europe for the first time, and 1 billion of euro has been liberated in that facility to buy equipment, military equipment. And one of the ideas was to buy and to transfer this mix from Poland to Ukraine. Why? Because pilots in Ukraine can fly MiGs, and so they use them immediately. And then started a whole incomprehensible discussion and diplomacy, where first it was okay, then it was not longer okay. But the reality on the ground is that if there is no fly zone, and I can understand why there is hesitation to start with a no-fly zone in Ukraine, at least if we don't want to do that, we have to give the airplanes, the military equipment, the protection in the air with the special equipment to the Ukrainian army. And it has to come the fastest as possible, because Putin is a war criminal, and what he is doing is killing civilians. That is, he wants to repeat in Kharkiv, in Kiev, and in other cities in Ukraine what we have seen in Syria. That is what he is doing. So it's not that we don't know what he wants to do. We have seen it already in Syria, and he's repeating that in a dramatic, tragic way now again in Ukraine.
Would you impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
I think that my first option would be to send additional airplanes and air defense systems to Ukraine, so that they can do the job properly. And that is what is, in my opinion, missing. Like I'm saying, is the one of the other. I can understand those who are saying, when you start with a no-fly zone now, immediately that is the start of World War III. That is what people are saying. It's what Biden has said. I can understand that reasoning, but then you have to be consequent. Then you have to send the necessary weaponry, airplanes to the Ukrainian army.
Do you think in any way Putin was encouraged to take the action he has by Brexit?
I have no clue about the influence of Brexit on what is happening. I was in Maidan, on the 20th of February 2014, the day when 49 people were killed by snipers of Yanukovych, and the day that That was the day before Yanukovych, the puppet of Putin, left the country. So, and these big demonstrations by the Ukrainians. I was there, and I have seen in the eyes of the people there that they wanted to belong to European values, democracy, and so on. And that is the real reason behind this war. Putin has an enormous fear, that anxiety that countries like Belarus, like Georgia, like Ukraine are definitely choosing for Western democracy and for European values. That is his worst nightmare. I don't think it's a security issue. It's absolutely not a security issue, because nobody of us wants to attack Russia. It's mainly an issue of Ukraine choosing the path of European democracy, and his anxiety that this could be an example for the elites and for the people in Russia also to choose for democracy and against his authoritarian rule.
Nigel Farage has said the conflict is because the EU and NATO tried to poke the Russian bear with a stick. What would you say to Mr. Farage?
Well, Mr. Farage he has said already many things. So I saw him the last years in the European Parliament before Brexit, as you know. He was member of the European Parliament. And there he was all the time defending Putin. I found it a shame. And I'm thinking to Winston Churchill, who had a little bit another opinion about the responsibilities of Britain than Farage colluding with Putin. So it's not
I have
only
to
an
challenge you
example
there,
of Farage.
Mr. Verhofstadt. In what way did he collude with Putin? I must ask on that one.
Why no? He was simply defending the positions of Russia and denying, in fact, Ukrainians and Belarus and Georgians and Moldavia to choose their own path to the democracy. But he's not an exception, you know. Every extreme right-wing politician in Europe has one or other link with Russia and with Putin.
You once said
Mrs.
that
Le Pen is paid.
Le Pen, Wilders are all cheerleaders. You once described them.
Yeah, cheerleaders, and even paid. So a part of the campaign of Mrs. Le Pen in France for the moment is paid by Russian banks who are linked to. So and that's the same for every extreme right-wing leader. Now they are denying it. They have not the guts anymore to talk about Putin and to talk about their links with Putin. Salvini, the leader of the extreme right-wing Lega Nord party in Italy, went even to the border with Poland and Ukraine to show his solidarity. But people knew him there, so they sent him back in saying, your place is not here. You were colluding with Putin, so your place is not here at the border with Ukraine and Poland.
Just a couple of extra words, if I may, on the outcome of Brexit. The Northern Ireland Protocol clearly isn't working. Is it fair for the UK to say it needs redoing to replace it?
Pacta sunt servanda is a very important phrase in Old Latin that says it all. When you have made an agreement, you stick to the agreement and you implement the agreement. So I didn't follow in detail since I'm not longer a Brexit coordinator anymore for the European Parliament, the file, but I think we have to stick to it. And if there are practical problems, I think the European Commission has always been ready to solve these practical problems. But the first thing to do is stick to the agreement.
When Brexit occurred, you, along with many others, had a nightmare vision for the United Kingdom. You thought it would be penniless and possibly friendless. Many would say that the United Kingdom is actually leading the way in Ukraine, that we have record people in employment, and the economy is quite strong. Is it time to revisit your views, Mr. Verhofstadt?
No, leading on Ukraine with asking visas to refugees and with holding oligarchs not accountable. I'm not so sure. But in any way, I think it's not the moment now in our fight with Putin to start a discussion between the UK, the European Union, the US, who is right and who is wrong. What we need to do now is to step up our sanctions, all three of us, and to make sure that Putin feels the pain himself and his cronies, and that he stops this war. That is what we need to do. Solidarity between us now.
Noting that you served for 9 years as the Prime Minister of Belgium, do you think Theresa May would have done a better job now than Boris Johnson as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
I don't know. How can I know that? But I had always a great esteem for Theresa May, because, and I think that Brexit could have been totally different if at a certain moment Labour and Conservatives were ready to cooperate and to find a way out of Brexit, more in the sense of an association agreement, Norwegian style, for example, than the cold Brexit we have now. And I'm still continuing to think that in a world as we see it today, with the aggression of Russia, would have been stronger today if the UK was a part of the EU. That I'm pretty sure. Brexit was a loss for everybody, for Britain and also for the European Union. No. But okay, we never know what will happen, Nick, in the future. There will be, in my opinion, a generation of young politicians in the UK who will say, oh, look, let's work together, let's enter in the European Union and let's change the European Union for the better.
So part of Renew Europe would be for the United Kingdom to renew its membership of the European Union, Mr. Verhofstadt.
Exactly, yeah. That's. I can tell you, I think that 90% of the European Parliament and the European politicians would like that, yeah, are in favor for that. And I am, in fact, part of a group, Renew, also with the French president, Macron, who is a member of Renew, and we are working on a real project for the future of Europe, a different Europe, a Europe where it's more efficient, not always acting too little, too late. And what we have seen since COVID with the fact that Europe started to issue Eurobonds to finance a recovery plan, with also the good reaction towards the crisis in Ukraine, buying together with 27 weaponry for the Ukrainian army. I think that's the right track, the right way forward, and that is what we are working on. And I'm pretty sure that the UK would have a fantastic role to play in it. Yeah.
Last question: when, sir? When will that happen?
I don't know. I hope that I still see it when I'm alive and you are alive, that we both can see it.
Let's celebrate that day. I will take you for a pint in Geneva on that day to celebrate that day for you, Mr. Verhofstadt.